Well everyone, the last time I talked about my patch ups, it was before version 9.0 that nerfed all the big midlines. So today I want to talk about that again with the meta that's developed since. It's been around for a while, and I think by now we have a pretty good handle on it. That said, I've talked about general buffs to death, and they don't really change too much since, well, not many weapons get relevant buffs. So today, I'm going to focus on what changes I think should be done to mostly the upper echelon of weapons. I'll give my shoutouts to what I think the 3 most important buffs are at the end though, so stay tuned for that, subscribe if you enjoy, and let's get started with the specials. I honestly don't have a whole lot to talk about here, as I think the specials are mostly healthy, but there are 3 I want to give focus to. The first one is Crab Tank. I enjoy Crab in the meta for the most part, and it's not like it's being picked 2 over anything, but sometimes the amount of area denied from a well-positioned Crab is just a little bit too good at stalling out the games. I do think that because of how good the special is right now, it is fair to slightly tone that aspect back while keeping it powerful enough. This will also serve to adjust Splash without nerfing it or its burst bomb directly. The changes I'm going to do is, first, the duration will be reduced from 8 to 7.5 seconds. 2 subs of special power will likely offset this nerf, which is good that it require a bit more gear for a weapon like Splash that normally can run a whole lot of swim right now, but I don't think it would be enough on its own. So in addition to that, the range should also be 3% shorter on both firing modes. Again, I don't want this to feel too different, but I think this will just slightly decrease the amount of space Crab controls and the time it's able to control it, which should hopefully improve pacing a little bit. Second up is Tri-Strike. Now that Zuka's been nerfed, I think this is actually probably the most problematic good special right now. The amount of pain output it has and area denial is too large, as well as forcing a lot of movement and being very spammable without being as committal as it probably should be. This is one of those specials where I do a lot more if we had a full rework, but I'm gonna keep it a bit shorter for now. This will be pretty simple. The radius will be decreased from 7 to 6.5 units. That should make its zone cheese more reasonable and deny a tiny bit less space. In addition to that, Neo Splash just gets too much strike, so it can go to 210p again. Strike just has a bit too many unhealthy attributes that I feel need to be toned down. Though if I'm doing that for Strike, you might guess that special number 3 has to be Reeve Slider. While certainly not as good as something like Crab or Strike, Slider's extremely large blast radius with special power-up can be extremely annoying for capping zones, especially in solo, and has a very annoying giant 70 radius, which I think is just a poor way of balancing around it. This is again another option where I'd love to do a lot more for a full rework, but I'm going to try to be a little more realistic here. Let's get rid of the most offensive attributes. First off, the paint radius will be reduced by 5%, and second off, the special power-up maximum effect for both the paint radius and 70 hitbox, not changing the 221 because that's fine, will be cut in half. This should remove its ability to cap zones by itself, even with special power-up, and make the 70 radius, while large, a lot more reasonable. As you might imagine though, without any form of compensation in the way of buffs, the special would be far too weak. So I'm just gonna do 2 of them for now. Special power-up will stack much better in smaller quantities, meaning that you should only have to run about a main now, giving a lot more gear freedom to slider weapons, helping with things like Dapples being able to run QR and come back more consistently, for instance. Secondly, I want to empower Reeve Slider's ability to take unique angles and pull attention. So it will now travel 20% faster and therefore 20% farther, giving you more options for where you want to explode or how you want to pull people away. I think this will keep it in relatively the same spot balance-wise, but it should be a lot more healthy now. I do have one more special I want to talk about though, and that's Inkjet. The reason being that I think it has a really interesting matchup against Crab, being very back and forth, so I think it would be a good option to mix up the meta while still being focused on those. So the changes I will do will be primarily to help it against long-range threats like Crab and Pencil. I'll be increasing the shot velocity by about 30% so that you don't have to lead your shots as much, and its movement in the air by about 5%. Again, this should just make its matchups against something like Crab a little bit easier. We can also throw in Rapid Deco being 200 points, by the way, because it doesn't need that. Anyway, that's it for the specials. Let's jump to the main weapons. Not every good meta weapon will be getting changes here. Some, like the Splashes or Slosher, are already adjusted via nerfs, and some are just fine as is. If I don't talk about them, then you could assume that's why. I have talked recently that I believe they can't tone Pencil back too much more because it would hurt how the main weapon feels, and it's also clear that other anchors need more buffs in order to be viable against it. However, despite the fact that it's been 220 with another paint nerf, it's still demolishing Edit Splatling's popularity, which I feel shouldn't be the case given how good that main weapon is. So I'm gonna slightly tone it back. Its damage range is gonna match Splat Charger instead of Splatter Scope. Pain range will be unchanged. Similar to Crab, the idea here is just to control how much long distance space it's able to influence, to help force its positioning a little bit closer and allow a little more back and forth interactions. I do also think this will help with its matchups against other anchors in particular though. Next up, let's talk about two weapons that I'm not nerfing, but I do feel should be looked at. S-Blast and Slosher. These two dominate mid-range AoE right now, and even though Bucket is a little bit weakened by the strike change, I think that both of them still need more competition. That said, I don't think either of them need to be any weaker, nor do I see any healthy way to do so right now. So instead, let's give it more options, because other AoE midlines actually do pretty good against these weapons, the most notable of which are Sloshing Machine and Range Blaster. So this will give it some direct competition that can also be a bit harder for it matchup-wise. For Machine, I'm going to be slightly reverting the nerf it got with its 5-frame changes, which is going to be shortening the interval between its continuous swings by 3 frames. It did lose 5 before, so it won't be exactly the same, but I think this would be enough to make the main weapon feel more powerful. In addition to that, since Fizzy Bomb's paint is toned back, it can also escape 220p to be 210. As for Range Blaster, I don't really want to revert its radius nerf. I feel like that was an overall healthy thing for how the weapon played. That said, I think it could use a little bit more tools to work around that smaller radius. So I'm going to give it the same changes Luna got. Its jump spread will be reduced from 8 to 6 degrees, and Intensify action will now stack similar, meaning you will only need to run 1 sub on your gear. In addition to that, since it has weaker specials, we can also make both of them 200p. The main idea behind this is to give Range Blaster a bit easier access to jumping without Tacticooler, as well as give it a bit more gear freedom to run things like swim speed or extra bomb defense, since that would be particularly good at dealing with stuff like S-Blast and Slosher, allowing you to play more around the nerfed radius, and giving you a little bit more gear freedom, which I think would be enough to give these weapons some competition. Next up is a top tier I actually want to buff a bit, and that's Squeezer. It did get a lot of nerfs, and after the nerfs toned it back, it also got its Zuka toned back, which to me has drastically reduced the reward curve for how difficult of an investment Squeezer now is. So because of that, I want to give it a little bit more back. Its shot velocity will be increased by 5%, which will be the same as pre-patch, but the range will still be less, and its strafe speed will be increased by 4%, which is, again, undoing half of its previous nerf. It will also go from 220p to 210 points for special. The original nerfs are kept in mind here, but like with Machine, I think they were done a little bit too much. This still has overall less range, strafe speed, and a weaker special than it did before, but the difference should now be less drastic. Now, another reason for the Squeezer change, along with that, is that because we're buffing other AoE midlines, it's really important we have other fighting weapons that aren't focused on that, so that it's not too common that you're fighting double AoE. All 3 swords and the newly buffed Squeezer already do a lot for this, especially given Wiper is particularly good against all those slower AoE options. However, I want to buff one more midline candidate that I feel would put a better emphasis on mobility and a bit different styles of play, and that's Dually Squelcher. I'm going to be buffing this weapon by reducing its spread, both grounded and in the air, by 25%, which also helps get rid of an old nerf it got at the end of Splatoon 2. And it makes Intensify action stronger for it, since it obviously reduces to the grounded RNG that it would have, which has been buffed. In addition to that, the points for special on both its kits will be -10. Similar to range, neither of these specials are that amazing, so I don't think it should have this low output. I am keeping in mind here that Dually Squelcher having weaker damage is a flaw that I think is necessary with its insane mobility, but I want to make the weapon feel more consistently rewarding for those who invest into it, and I think the weapon spread is just a little inconsistent, so if you have good aim, it'll be better at making up for those flaws now. To wrap things up, one more change, and that's Dually. Since this weapon is the closest competition to Splash right now, and suffers from the same crab nerfs, I'm going to give it a slight buff to give it a more even dynamic. That'll just be increasing the dodge roll distance by 3%. And that's all the changes I have. I will give out 3 honorable mentions for the things I most want to see buffed, which would be Dynamo and H3 so Cooler could be more diverse, and Wavebreaker, which I've already done its own video on, which you could check out right here. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, and let me know your hopes in the comments below.